Hey everyone, it's Angela with FoodStorageAndSurvival.com, and today we're going to talk about the essentials for an off-grid sewing kit. Now, I know some of you don't sew at all, which is totally fine. I love to sew, so I'm here to help you. All right. If you're putting together a sewing kit for survival, there's so many things if you walk into a sewing store that you don't need. There are a few things that you do need, and so today we're just going to talk about the very basics. They're going to be what you need, no more than what you need. Now, as you do some sewing, maybe get a little more practice with it, you might find that there's some things that you want that I didn't discuss in this kit, but for the most part, I'm really sticking to the essentials, the basics of what you want in your sewing kit. Now, I'm also talking off-grid sewing, so I'm talking no power. We're not going to be using a sewing machine. I know that you can get a treadle machine, and great on ya. I would love one. Bring it on over. You can look for one that is an antique treadle machine, but there are also modern treadle machines. So if you are up to that level and you want to invest in a modern treadle machine, I think they're about between $200 and $250, somewhere in there. They're called the Janome 712T, and I'll put a link to that in the description of this video. So you can link on over to that modern made treadle machine. It does straight stitch, zigzag, a bunch of stuff. Really a nice looking machine. But let's talk about sewing without a sewing machine. We're putting together just a hand sewing kit. Okay, the first thing that you're going to need is needles. I brought some with me so I can show y'all. Needles. Now, needles come in a variety of sizes, and you want to get a variety of sizes. You want some bigger, some smaller. They are sized kind of like shotguns and wires. So the larger the number, the smaller the needle. Okay, same with the shotgun. A 12 gauge is larger than a 20 gauge, right? So they're gauged. It's a gauged deal. Okay, you want a variety of needles. You want them to be able, you want to be able to thread the eyes. Some have smaller eyes than others. I don't know why the sewing people make them like that, but look at the eyes on the needles. Make sure that you're going to be able to get a piece of thread through it. All right, you don't want to go super cheap on your needles. Okay, you don't want them breaking. I've not had too much problem with needles breaking though, so they're relatively inexpensive. Just get a bunch of them. All right, second thing that you're going to need is thread. Thread. Yay, look. Okay, you can tell I love sewing. I'm like, hey, thread, I'm happy. Thread comes in various thicknesses as well. Your general all-purpose thread, this is an all-purpose, and that's going to do you for pretty much everything that you are going to be sewing. You may also want a thicker thread for buttons or heavier sewing jobs. And this is called button thread or craft thread or carpet thread. And when you go to your thread section, it will be there. Just look for it. You can see the thickness of it. You can see that it is a thicker thread. And these are great. I use this all the time right now for sewing buttons on because I don't have to make quite as many swipes around with it. Okay, next thing that you're going to need is pins. Okay, there's a variety of different kinds of pins. These are straight pins. Will it focus on that? Yeah, straight pins. Here's some pretty straight pins. Okay, you can get different kinds of straight pins. Get some pins that are good quality, that are sharp on the end. Okay, we've bought some cheap pins before, and some of the ends were not cut right, and they had fat chunks of metal on the ends of the pins. Just get a decent quality pin. You can get straight pins. So the straight pins are going to hold your fabric together as you're sewing so that the two pieces of fabric don't slip against each other while you're sewing. Does that make sense? This is important stuff if you want things to turn out nicely. The other kind of pin you're going to want to get is safety pins. Safety pins. Sometimes you can avoid sewing altogether if you have safety pins. You can just pin that thing shut. Okay? So safety pins are fantastic. Have a bunch of those in your kit. Okay, next thing that you want in your survival sewing kit is some aids to help with difficult sewing. If you've got to sew through thick fabrics, like through canvas or a tent or a tarp, or if you're going to sew through a number of layers of fabric at the same time, shoving a needle through there, it gets hard, okay? It gets challenging. So here's a few of my favorite helps. First is a thimble. Grandma had a thimble, you know, you've got a thimble. The thimble helps push the needle through the fabric. It protects your finger. All right, these are little grippies. Grippy, I don't know what they're called, but they grab the needle. Maybe a needle gripper. I promise you, I will link to all these things down in the description of this video so that you can find them. Needle grips. All right. Oh, and the other thing, so you've got something to push through and you've got something to pull with. Sometimes I even use my pliers. Okay, these are my baby Leatherman pliers. And I use them to pull a needle through. Once I've got it poked through a little bit, I'll grab it with the pliers and pull it through. Okay, so something to help with the difficult sewing, the thick fabric sewing that you might have to do. All right, next thing that you're going to want is scissors. Scissors. All right, you can almost sort of read that still, but it said fabric only. Your fabric scissors don't have to be spectacular. They don't have to be super expensive, but you don't want people using them to cut pipe cleaners. Hey, yeah, that's happened to me. I've seen one lady that's gone so far as to put a padlock through her fabric scissors so that nobody used them because they were locked shut. Fabric scissors are for fabric. They will stay sharper and be more useful to you if you only use them on fabric. So get you a pair that you can tuck into your kit. That's just for fabric. You might want to get a little pair as well. Okay, so I've got a big pair and a little pair. And those are, they're great for getting into little spaces. Not really necessary, but sometimes they're useful. Mine came as a set, so I got both. All right, next thing that you're going to need dun, 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 is a seam ripper. I know. You who do sew, you know the love-hate relationship that you have with your seam ripper, right? Me too. A seam ripper is to rip out the mistakes that you make. Except when you're hand sewing, you're going to pay a lot more attention and you're not going to make so many mistakes, right? So primarily you're going to need your seam ripper in your survival sewing scenario to take things apart so that you can use that fabric or use those pieces and put it back together in a different way. That's why you want a good seam ripper. Okay. And the last thing in your essential survival sewing kit, and remember, I know I probably skipped some of your favorite things that you sew with, but this is the basics, the very basic essentials. Last thing is buttons. I know you think, this lady's crazy. Buttons. Okay, if you have to fix a closure, and I talk about this in another video where I'm going to tell you the 4 skills that you need to have with sewing for a survival scenario. Okay, and fixing a closure is one of them. If you need to fix a closure, oh boy, if you know how to sew, you know sewing a zipper in is a pain in the neck. Okay, new zippers, big old pain. But sometimes you can replace a zipper with buttons. That's what I would do for the long term because buttons have a way, way lower fail rate than zippers anyway. So if you've got a little supply of buttons, you can fix a lot of closures even if it didn't originally have a button. Okay, does that kind of make sense? So you can get your button collection started pretty simple by cutting buttons off of clothes that you're going to get rid of anyway. So shirts that have worn out or pants that have worn out, cut the buttons off of them. And then you're starting your button collection for free. Okay, there are the essentials, the very basics that you want in a survival sewing kit. Like I said, as you sew more, you might find things that you want to add to it to round out your kit a little better. But if I was putting together a brand new sewer survival sewing kit, those are the things that I would put in it. Now, just before I go, a word about buying a pre-assembled sewing kit. There are pre-assembled sewing kits, just like there are pre-assembled survival kits, and they have the same problems. The pre-assembled sewing kits will have products in there that you don't really need, okay, and they will have products that they're not quality. Even a mid-grade quality pair of scissors is going to be better than what you're going to get in most of those basic sewing kits that they've put together. Especially, and that's where we got those cheap pins. Remember the cheap pins I told you about? I did tell you about those. No, probably not. All right, we had some pins, like straight pins, and they had like extra metal gunk on the tips of them because they were just cheap. They weren't made well. So it's worth spending just a little bit extra and getting good quality products to have in your sewing kit rather than going super cheap and buying a pre-assembled kit that has cheaply made products in it and probably has some stuff that you don't even really need in there and may not have some of the things that you do need. So I would definitely put together my own kit, being an experienced seamstress. So that's why I made this video, to tell you what you need in your kit and what you don't need in your kit. So hopefully this helps you get a survival sewing kit put together. Thanks for joining me. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments and I'll get back with you. And again, I will link to all these products in the video description. Thanks again. We'll catch you later. Bye.